Hi, lovely to see you. I mean, so the first question, I think, which is the most important question is, how did that compare to fifth grade health class?
Basically exactly the same. That's just what I remember.
Yeah, probably not
Yeah,
the 4, 5, 6 partner thing, but similar.
yeah. Understood, understood. How much virtual note passing took place there?
Yeah, and probably a lot less like touching of the unmute and mute buttons. But.
Yeah, fair enough, fair enough. So it's great to see both of you. I think for starters, I introduced both of you by name and title, and your title is obviously on your background, but maybe if you guys wouldn't mind leading off by just giving 15 to 30 seconds of your role, what you oversee, your remit, what you're focused on. Jean, would you mind leading off?
Sure. Thanks, Michael. Jean Fitzpatrick. I work at Kinesso, which is an IPG company, and I manage all of our supply partnerships for addressable media. So that's publishers, SSPs and exchanges, and then some of the companies that we see that are doing like building out innovation in terms of starting to track some of this stuff and visualize it.
Great.
And I'm Sarah. Sorry, a little delayed. I run our programmatic revenue and strategy, and data. So I oversee our open and private deals and revenue. So similar to Jean and like the fact of working and touching like all SSP, DSP, partnership, contract relationships, kind of like biz devish.
Cool, excellent, excellent. Okay, so to kick this thing off and to start here, on the subject of SPO, so you're both TripleLift partners, you both saw that presentation. You know that we feel very strongly that if you try to begin to diagnose the issues with the super tangled, confusing supply chain, a lot of it points to the issue of resellers and all of these resellers that are sucking up media dollars and reducing efficiency within the supply chain. We also feel, and we'll talk about this later based on the sort of stake that the Trade Desk put in the ground 2 weeks ago, that duplication is also an issue within the supply chain. But outside of those two factors, when both of you think about SPO, is there anything else that comes to mind? Is there anything else that we as an industry need to focus on? Sarah, maybe we can start with you.
Yeah, so I think one thing, and we talked about this a little bit recently, was just that it's a totally different, I mean, it's a different POV for publishers versus the buyer versus the DSP and the SSP. From a publisher perspective, you want as much demand in the marketplace, especially in a first price auction. So when you think about SPO, you want to make sure that you're obviously being efficient and sympathetic in terms of like the complicated landscape that we've all created for ourselves. But we also need to think about like, we want as many bids to yield that dollar, the best dollar, the most dollar for that impression. So I feel like that's like a little bit of a different twist from a publisher side, but something that we definitely think about.
Yeah, I mean, it's a balance.
No.
I think that when we first started going into DSPs and kind of demanding, everybody talks about transparency, but there's a guy on my team who really manages the SSP and exchange partnerships, and Brandon Goody, and he was saying that this is the year that we stop talking about transparency and start talking about visibility. There's a big difference for a buyer. And coming from the supply side, I definitely share the POV that Sarah has, that like you still need to monetize the inventory. Sorry, that's my landline. So it's going to keep going. We'll just keep going. The last ring was a long time. So like there is this idea that programmatic, like if you're finding your audience and you're hitting your KPI, why does everybody care so much how a publisher sets up their ad stack? And that's, that is a consideration. And then on the buy side, when we started asking for more visibility into these transparency initiatives that the supply side was taking up and really championing, and we weren't seeing parity within the tools, and we start going to the DSPs saying, we want more tools that do this, and they've certainly come a long way in the past 9 months. But initially their response was like, if we give you access to this stuff, you're not going to be able to buy any inventory, and you're not, and kind of echoing that do you really want to cut off all of these opportunities for supply? And I just remember having a conversation with one of the big DSPs and saying, I don't think you're giving the buy side enough credit. People are really smart. They're pulling the right data. They're going as deep as they can, but you're really preventing buyers from optimizing without giving them tools into the visibility of these initiatives on the supply side. So like sellers.json, great. I got to get it from every single SSP. They need to provide it. I need to see how that stacks up against our spend on the top ComScore, whatever. I need to see how that stacks up against our spend across the industry, and then how that stacks up against our spend with that individual SSP. So there's a lot of analysis that needs to go into that, and there aren't tools that just do it for you.
Got it. Okay, there was a lot there. I have a few follow-up questions on that. You mentioned some of the tools being released or that had been released a year or two ago. Beyond sellers.json, is there anything else that you found your partners were producing that was helping with this process? And two, has the sort of expectation of the usage of them or the recommendation from your partners on the usage of them changed? Like, are you more encouraged by your partners to use these now than you were 2 years ago?
Who are my partners in this scenario?
The DSPs.
The DSPs. So I think that, I think it's tough, particularly at a big holding company, for the right folks at a big DSP to find the right folks at a big holding company. So I think that's one, is just like the time that it takes to connect the right folks takes a minute. And then once you get there, things can move really quickly. So there's definitely encouragement in their support with the tools that exist, and we're tapping into them today. And so we'll take advantage of everything in this space that exists today, but we also want to think about, how we're becoming more of an application-based company and providing that to our clients. So eventually, if this all just lives within tools that are different within each of the DSPs, it's not incredibly helpful. We're really looking for those DSPs to quickly innovate, move to API-based options, and then control that within a centralized platform on our side. So, we solve one problem of being able to like execute today, and then there's this whole problem of like how do we get to that next level and take more control over? Because right now you just got to trust that they did what you asked them to do. You got to hope that the tool works the way they sold it in.
Noted. Sarah, on your end, you sort of talked about here, it was a little choppy at the beginning. I believe what you were saying is that you've historically sort of just been incentivized to open up as many supply chains as possible, as many paths to your inventory as possible, because that's just sort of what helps maximize revenue. And on the publisher side, there's not as much of an incentive for SPO. Does that sound right?
Yeah, I mean, just to elaborate, like, especially because we're talking about safe media, like, I want to be clear, like, we're not working with the bajillion partners. We have no tags. To even the safety part, I would say, like, in your slide, like mentioning some of the SSPs and stuff that you mentioned, like, we're very specific on who we work with. And because we're a search company, primarily search, we care so much about page speed that we do not, it's a little unique situation. But to that point, and also to what Jean's saying about, like, we want to be strategic with our partners. We also want to understand client by client specifics. And I don't want to go into the trade desk thing, because I know we're going to do that later. But even in those instances of the SPO, it's like different SSPs have different capabilities and reasons why we work with them for things. Like, we are very strategic and thought out. It's like the specific amount of targeting that, one SSP might have over another, or, the capabilities into how they measure viewability is different. So, like, in that sense, yes, we do care and we want to be as efficient as possible. But when you're talking about one single impression in a first price auction world, we do want to see that impression go for, the most value that it can. So it's kind of like, it's a twofold.
For sure. Have you found a sweet spot of the number of platforms you want to work with? Or is it sort of something you're constantly optimizing?
It's constantly optimizing. The other thing, and I think for publishers, is like publishers that have a diversified portfolio of publishing, meaning like we work across finance and beauty and lifestyle, like similar to a lot of the other, like, I don't want to say networks, but like bigger publishing companies, like you have to really think about it because it's specific demand and there's specific DSPs that work within, you know, the teleco vertical or something like that. It's always changing. I think this idea that Jean keeps talking about, like a universal plug-in and plug-and-play things to simplify, is kind of like, I mean, I think that's what the goal of pre-bid is or was, is so that you are able to do that. And if you can do that in like different ways and with ads.txt and make things a little bit more seamless, I think that'll be, you know, that's the goal eventually.
For sure. For sure. Jean, as you have started to test some of these tools and optimize the supply paths you're buying through, and in some instances lean into sellers.json, what have the results looked like? Have you seen an improvement in performance?
Yeah, yep. We definitely see that. So there's a lot of different, I think this comes back to, there's this idea that exchanges have been completely commoditized and they're all the same. And I think Sarah touched on it. That's not true. And the deeper you go into SPO, you realize that's not true at all. All of these companies are a little bit different and some will fit your business in different ways. So in that same vein, there are different advantages to different versions of SPO and the different things that you can do within it. So say that there's a reduced take rate. We do find that like investing there, we'll see CPMs go up at first and then they start to decline and then you win more. The question is, what are you winning more of? And is it leading to better KPIs? Does it actually matter? Sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it does. And then that's going to depend on the client. So there's a lot of mixing and matching of variables along the SPO path. I think, what's another example? We have seen, so, you know, we're a large holding company, so we do upfront deals with some of the bigger publishers in this space. And with that, there are some of those publishers who have their own SSPs and they provide zero rates there, and then our spend there hits our upfront dollar number. So we see if we start to optimize towards those paths, we get more working media for our clients in a really measurable way. Like we can get it down to the dollar amount. We can say like we can assume all the other SSPs charged together roughly 15%. Now we're going through your O&O the majority of the time, and that is going to give our clients, you know, X% more working media. So it's going to depend on the publisher, the exchange, the client, and then kind of like all of these dimensions within that.
And just sorry, really, like what you're talking about, like on the different efficiencies and price points, like we realize that too. So we look at like, if we change a floor price in our open, because we slot everything like by tier, by ad slot, by vertical, by unit, like we also have to realize that it takes buyers at least 72 hours to figure out that we change the floors so that we can see what's happening. So like we are aware of that, and I'm like, oh, it'll take, I don't say like Jean specifically, but sometimes I do, like it'll take Jean 3 days to like figure this out and be able to like bid above or below it. So like we're looking at that too.
Yeah, I'd say on our end, our test period was at 6 weeks because we also have to account for like campaign changes, you know, like our like incremental dollars, things like that. It was a campaign pause because creative was late. So we have to give ourselves so much time. I think we've gotten down to a place where we can do where everyone is more comfortable with a 2-week test period. But, you know, to start, we just had to figure out like, how much time does it take for us to realize what's changed? Noted.
You both were freezing up there a little bit, or maybe that was me, in fact. But I think I got most of it. What about on the subject of directness specifically? Have either of you, Jean, have you tested what performance looks like when you buy direct versus buy through resellers?
What is performance here? Just like, well,
I think
right?
That's the question for you, yeah.
So, I mean, again, I'm like, I say this all the time. It just like, it's because we have so many clients and we try to create, you know, they all have unique needs, and that can change campaign to campaign. Those tactics are different. So it really is going to depend on the client and what they're trying to achieve. So if it's a really DR focused client, then we're really just going to look at that, at like how low is that CPM? And then in some ways the path matters less, because you might go through a few resellers but still be able to get, you know, attribution of some kind at the end of the day with that impression. And then branding campaigns where you might just want to be a little bit closer. And I mean, I think we also kind of forget that like PMP is the ultimate SPO tool. So there's that too. And if I'm doing a branding campaign, then I'm talking to Sarah directly. Like she's going to set me up in the best way possible if I'm talking to her directly. And so I can use that tool. That's a really simple tool that traders are really comfortable with and already tapping into.
And also I think from that, like that perspective also, I think it's more the concept for me of the reseller piece also. And we've had this conversation, but then like just across the board publishers, I think most publishers are in conclusion of like, we don't want resellers, is like, you have an entire sales team. So you have to look at like kind of what you're doing in that capacity. And then those initiatives change too, right? You're like, maybe I don't need an entire sales team, or like, you know, this is doing it itself. But, you know, we've seen constantly things where when resellers are reselling your inventory, they'll go ahead and put like borders around a 300 by 250 and pretend it's pre-roll, or like things that you just don't totally, you know, that's where the problem is, because that's like where the fraud comes in and you have no idea, and like all of that sort of thing. And then the other piece of that is just like you're undermining your direct business. So I think those are like, from a reseller perspective, I feel like we've made so many like complicated things about it, when the fact of the matter is it's just like, it's always better to buy, you know, from the store or the online store than going to like a department store, because, you know, the store probably has like more variety and quality and all of that stuff. And then as you take a step back each time, like you're going to get a little bit less of the truth, essentially.
Noted. I want to pivot for a second and talk a little bit about the trade desk, which I know we, last week when we caught up, we earmarked as something we wanted to talk about today. So the trade desk 2 weeks ago took that first step towards trying to reduce or eliminate the amount of duplicative inventory that they receive on their end. And I wanted to get both of your perspectives on that, because that's a major, major step for the ecosystem, of course, on trying to improve the supply path and actually exercise a form of supply path optimization. So maybe Sarah, starting with you, because I think you opened by talking a little bit about how you've opened up a lot of different lines of access to your inventory. What was your reaction to that? How did it affect your business directly? How have you changed your setup to accommodate for it? Can we hear you talk about that one a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, my first reaction was like, oh crap, right now, come on, like we've got so much going on. But obviously now that this is the new norm, I also was like, oh, like it makes you think. Also, it challenges me for sure to think about like, is this going to affect my business? What does this mean for publishers? Like, you're talking about one of the larger DSPs and global DSPs doing this, and how is it going to affect our business? My reaction was, to be honest, was like a little bit of panic, like, crap, what are we going to do? And then as I dug deeper into it, I like started to become more okay with it and understanding what the reasons were in terms of like the cost on their end, or like, you know, the queries, the things that like on a publisher side, you don't always think about it. But then you start really, and that's when you really like dive deeper into kind of like what your integration looks like. To your point, like Michael earlier, you were like, is it just constantly evolving? And then like, yes, because then it makes you think about like, well, the reason that I'm doing these things, like, am I being strategic, or am I just getting greedy? Or like, you know, because there are things like TAM and EBDA where you can plug and play people in so quickly, like, what do I, you know, have I like overshot it? Or also, and it makes you think about this from a direct sales perspective, when I'm talking to people like Jean, it's like, there's so much inventory right now in the marketplace. Like, I don't know about people on the line, but like you just are constantly consuming because you're at home, and rather than having the conversations, you're reading about them. So I think also from that side, buyers are like, holy crap, there's so much inventory out there. So those were like all my initial reactions. And then as we dug deeper, it was kind of like how making sure that it kind of gives you as a publisher a checkpoint to like be more strategic, and make sure that, you know, like the reason you're setting these things up is like there is always a reason. So it was kind of like a good exercise to make sure that you're doing all the right things, and then where you need to like make those partnerships better to be able to do them in other places. Sorry, that was it was a lot of big reactions.
And what were the effects? Are you comfortable sharing?
Yeah, actually, we haven't really seen any effects. I mean, to Jean's point of like buyers taking a long time, like that could be a piece of it. Although I do think that buyers do, and when I say buyers, I talk about like the DSPs, not so much like direct PMP relationships that you're gonna like actually get effect no matter what. I think, I mean, and also there's just so much inventory. We haven't seen a big effect. I've also talked to a bunch of other DSPs that are like, we've been doing this for ages. And, you know, the trade desk is one of the largest. So it's like very interesting for them. It's a bigger deal for them than it is smaller ones. But a lot of people were like, we've been doing this for a while. So that was another thing. It's just like a learning exercise of like, another question that you should be asking, like when you're talking about like safe supply, that you should be asking your DSPs, and like, you know, as you come up with your own checklist of things you care about, that should definitely be one of the questions going forward.
Noted. Well, that's really encouraging. Jean, what about you and your perspective on the trade desk announcement 2 weeks ago?
As like an ad tech nerd, I was like, ooh, what's going to happen? As a buyer, I was like, it's like totally out of my control. What am I going to do? Like, what am I going to do about it? I know the SSPs that I have a partnership with where I'm getting more than just a pipe to publisher inventory. They're co-innovating with us. They're supporting us in terms of education from a technological perspective. They're helping us advance in identity. They're helping us understand all sorts of things that we don't get from the DSPs today. So as a buyer, my first reaction was, I just want to make sure I can still buy at scale with the exchanges and SSPs who are doing more for my clients. And so that was my first concern. You know, we rely on the DSPs a lot to make supply path decisions for us. Even within the supply path optimization tools that exist, we still rely on them to implement those tools and trust that they're doing that. There's not a button in the trade desk that lets me pick that path of like, what header is this exchange accessing the publisher from? So the exchange and the publishers have to make that decision, and I have to trust that they're going to make the decision that enables me to get to those pipes and get to that media.
Noted. Okay. We are running short on time, but I did want to ask, where, if you look forward 12 months, 24 months, how do you guys both see the supply chain evolving and strengthening and becoming more healthy? What are the sort of innovations that we expect to see? Is this concept of reseller going to solve itself? Is the concept of duplicative inventory going to solve itself? Do we think it's here to stay? How do you see things evolving overall? Jean, maybe we'll start with you on this one.
Sure. I mean, I would hope that we would see some of these technologies evolve into CTV and OTT a little bit more seamlessly. Like that's definitely what I'm excited for, is new formats to get to the same level of technical maturity that display and online video have. I think that DSPs will take one road or the other. They'll take the road of, I know what's best for you, so I'm gonna make these optimizations and just sell it to you. Or they're gonna take the path of, I want to be more modular and put more control in your hands. So I'm going to develop tools that you can use that have a lot of different options. I obviously like the latter better. And I think that we'll be working more with those partners that are able to present, those solutions and put the control back in the hands of the buyer.
Excellent. Excellent. Sarah, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think all of this stuff is helpful. Like, it's always good to like test new things and theories. So I think that, like what the trade desk is doing and what, will that next be DD360's move and like, et cetera, and it'll continue to evolve. I think the concept of pre-bid will change things and evolve as more and more people get on board. Like, and that's for us too. Like, we're actually moving on in the next few months, but like,
Right.
Yeah, really up with the times. But I think that I think stuff like that, I think with like the third party cookie and all of those conversations, I think basically we've just overcomplicated everything. And my prediction in 12 months is that we're still going to be doing that, but we will be having more strategic conversations of like how to get back to the basics. So I think that's what we'll see. I think the concept of a PMP, which my CEO always says, like, don't try to get too cute. And like, I feel like that's like such a thing that like ad techers.
Yeah, okay.
So I feel like it's going to be back to like, okay, like this makes sense for this deal. Let's like set up the deal and see if it works, and like back to the basics basically. Because that's when we were really strong. And I would say over the past few years when we like tried to get too cute, kind of like now we're going backwards. So
I think that's a good point. There's just going to be more disruptors that where the stakes are higher, and we're all going to have to focus on those things. So some of this will solve itself.
hopefully, yeah.
I love that. I love that.
Plan.
To close here, we're going to pivot subjects entirely. I'd like to end with a couple rapid fire questions for you guys about life under quarantine. Okay? 1-word answers, 5-word answers at most, but I'll just spit them out quickly. We'll go Sarah Jean. That'll be the order, okay?
Got it.
The first question: what is the best and worst thing you have learned about yourself while under quarantine? So that's a 2-word answer.
The best and worst thing. I'm extremely organized, which I didn't really
Okay.
is a good thing. And the worst thing is probably that I'm extremely organized. Like my children can't even like play with more than one toy at once. So
Noted.
I'd say I'm an early riser when I don't have to get to the office, so that's great. And the bad thing is I'm extremely disorganized, so there's toys everywhere.
yeah, but you have
Okay.
a house, so it doesn't matter.
For
We're
both of you, what is on your Spotify work from home playlist right now? Sarah.
like Frozen 2. Yeah.
Me too. Good one.
Mine is I just downloaded the Jim Croce Essentials album, which has been really fun, and spa music to help my children go to sleep at night.
Excellent. How many times have both of you actually done conference calls with pajama pants on? Sarah.
How many times?
Yeah. Estimate.
What have we been? 54 days? Maybe like 50.
Yeah.
I'd say it's so hot here. I'm usually wearing like shorts, like jean shorts when I'm working.
Must be nice. Here's the last question. When you daydream about where you could be quarantined, if you could be quarantined anywhere in the world, what you're fantasizing about, where is that, Sarah?
The south of France.
Cool.
That's where I'm supposed to go this summer on vacation, and clearly not.
I'd say also in the south of France, but with Sarah.
Lovely. That's a perfect way to end. Thank you. We're right at time here, so I don't know if we have time for questions. I'm just checking with marketing. It looks like no time for questions, but guys, this was great. Thank you so much. Thank you for making the time. I learned a ton, and we look forward to connecting with you both again soon.
Thanks.
Thank you.